Hello, everyone. Welcome to Symphony University episode 11. Today we have Didier Morais here with us. He's going to be covering the Publicity Playbook. Didier, I'll give you the floor. You can introduce yourself and we can go from there. I did mention to people that are still coming in, we're having an interactive session. So drop your questions as we do go on, and we'll try to have a conversation back and forth with Didier.
It's a pleasure, everybody. I'm Didier Morais. I am the founder and CEO of Vital Versatility, PR firm that I launched 3.5 years ago. And just to kind of give you guys just a little bit of context about me and just some of my background real quick. But I was, I didn't actually even start off in publicity. I was a sports journalist. When I was in college, I always wanted to be, the next Stephen A. Smith, right? And then I kind of took a non-traditional route to where I was at. I spent a couple of years as a sports reporter for the Houston Chronicle and New England Sports Network, and specifically in New England, covering the Boston Red Sox, doing some on-air work with them, which was obviously a great experience. But, I saw the landscape start to change, right? And I saw obviously that I had translatable skills from journalism to PR, and ultimately started off doing a little bit of tech PR, and then ended up going to a firm where I worked and supported clients such as Rock Nation. And really one of the big breaks that happened for me in my career was spearheading the Free Meek movement to get Meek Mill out of prison and sparking kind of a nationwide conversation about criminal justice reform. And then just kind of from there started to build my Rolodex. And, over time, obviously, decided to bet on myself and take the leap of faith and start my own PR firm and with Vital Versatility. And now, we represent the likes of, still working with Rock Nation, but we work with versatile amount of entertainers, personalities, and brands like Megan Thee Stallion, Druski, Fat Joe, Yo Gotti's CMG record label, and supporting, acts like, Glorilla, Neo, E40, Too Short. But then obviously, personalities like Van Jones, restaurants like Say Less that are, well known for being, celebrity hotspots. We work with Puma, and just, several other, brands and organizations, Long Island University, Rewinded 10, which is a hair and beard dye that we work with Fat Joe and Travis Kelce, and then and also do the publicity for billionaire Carolyn Aronson. So obviously, we called it Vital Versatility, intentionally, because what we take pride in is, even though we have such a strong presence in the entertainment industry, we feel like we can do the corporate PR when we need to. We can do the sports stuff when we need to. I mean, we can hit a bunch of buckets in the social justice space as well. So I think that's one of the things where us as a team, we feel, really, really proud of just the different types of media that we can reach out to. So that's just a little bit about me. And if we can go to the next slide, please. And just, covers, right? So obviously, listen, as a publicist, your job is to be a storyteller. And I think storytelling comes in different forms and shapes. And obviously, first and foremost, it covers how, when you really think of a publicist and a PR person's job. And I like to tell people, it's like, even though we do brands and entertainers are brands in themselves, right? You look at someone like Megan Thee Stallion and Fat Joe, they are brands. When it comes to PR, your responsibility is not only to tell their story, but also as a protector of their brand, protector of their story. That's, crisis PR comes into part of it, but it's also being able to position them and put them in front of different audiences where they're not normally accustomed to. And I think that's kind of the beauty of what we love to do. And I personally take a lot of passion, right? And I think I kind of like to use, what actually go with Yo Gotti or Megan Thee Stallion's Forbes covers, right? It's because, even with, Yo Gotti, right? I've been working with Gotti for 6 years, and he's just incredibly intelligent, astute businessman. But I think for such a long time, the narrative around Gotti was simply just as an artist, right? And the success that he's had as an artist. But obviously over time, then we started repositioning his brand as an executive. He's the founder of CMG Records that, has signed multiple artists like Moneybagg Yo, like 42 Doug, ESTG, and Glorilla. And there's just a whole entrepreneurial side of Gotti that people didn't really know. And just even him as an investor And I think over time we have been telling that story, but I think really it's just like, okay, especially when it comes to entertainers, how do we tell the stories, outside of music? Because of course there's the rinse repeat. Hey, you're dropping a new song, do a promo, do a couple podcasts, cool. But it's like it's also sustaining a story over a long period of time. And how do you do that in an effective way that's going to resonate with people, but also start to shift the perception? And even when I started working with Meg, I think one of my biggest call outs, she had already done so many phenomenal covers, but I'm just like, you're also a brand. You have all these different partnerships. It's like you're a mogul, right? And then I think that's one of the things that we were proud of is just even with Meg, we got her the cover of Forbes, and she was the first Black woman to be on the cover of the Forbes under 30 issue. And I think it was really special to be, part of history in that respect. But I think in different ways, we also work with country artists, such as Mickey Guyton. And I think that's just really the beauty of how can we find different ways of, telling stories in different manners. I like to point to, someone like, Fat Joe or E40, who we represent, right? And again, they're known as hip hop icons, but it's like, how else can we tell their story? And then that they're huge, sports fans, right? Fat Joe always courtside at Knicks games, E40 always courtside at Warriors games, and I think anytime that you're talking to prospective clients and you want to get that comprehensive story of their interests, that's what's going to allow you to build the appropriate strategy to be able to actually help execute a comprehensive PR campaign. And I think that's why, again, a lot of people, when you think just musician or just entrepreneur, you think strictly with that lane. And that's why it's like, now, okay, if let's look at someone like Fat Joe. Let's take him as a quick case study, for example, right? Obviously iconic entertainer, huge sports fan. He has a business now. He has a hair and beard dye business. He's also very passionate about politics, right? And he's been a big advocate for healthcare price transparency reform. So you take that there, and it's like, okay, cool. So it's like outside of the music and entertainment stuff, all right, I can put him on ESPN, I can put him on Fox Sports, but I can also put him on CNN. I can put him on MSNBC where he can have thoughtful conversations about healthcare price transparency reform, right? He goes to Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. once or twice a year to advocate, for legislation. So it's like, all right, great. That lends itself to that. Joe's son is autistic, and that's something that he's very passionate about. So even just now, for those who don't know, April is known as Autism Awareness Month. So we actually had him on the Today Show yesterday in Miami, which is why I was there, and he was doing an interview where it touched on some of his, of course, his music exploits, but also was using an opportunity for him to really talk about parenting a child with autism and using his narrative just to share and bring awareness to it and to the challenges, but also to help inspire and bring hope to those that it's like, hey, like I deal with this as well. Here's some advice. Here's my story, and this is how I can get the word out to try to help others. And I think that's the beauty from how we like to approach our PR from a comprehensive perspective. So I think that just obviously the covers are, of course, are a piece of it. But the reason why I wanted to also show some of these covers is because it shows people in places that you're not always traditionally accustomed to seeing them in. And if we can go to the next slide, please. And obviously another big part of PR is, TV appearances. So of course, there's a lot of elements to it. And of course it's, PR has changed so much over the years. So for the longest time, obviously, back in the day it was newspapers and TV, and now things went online, and now you're even seeing the shift to digital and social media where, you know, right now when you're looking at not only Gen Z, but even, the generation below them, they're consuming the news and content strictly from Instagram and TikTok, right? So, that's one of those things where, of course, national TV is still a big focus. And obviously that's, where again, it kind of lends itself to where we can put people in different positions. Like I think one cool thing a couple years ago is instead of having Megan Thee Stallion be a host, sorry, excuse me, have a guest at the Jimmy Fallon show, we were like, hey, why don't we have you as a co-host with Jimmy, and we can show people a different side of your personality, you as an interviewer. And I think that's kind of a beautiful thing. Or even with someone like Mickey Guyton, a well-known country artist. But what people don't know is she loves herself some reality TV. She loves talking about it. And, obviously Andy Cohen his show Watch What Happens Live, all they talked about was just, reality TV, but an opportunity for her to also plug in some of her music exploits as well. So, and Druski, so going back to my point about digital and social media, you look at someone like Druski, right, who he's an entertainer and a comedian, and he really started off with a heavy presence online. But then what we've been doing over the last couple of years is been building his brand and building it into just kind of a whole nationwide force. And it took some time, but I think the beauty with putting him on the Jennifer Hudson show for, especially a lot of those that are watching, is the Jennifer Hudson show has had what's been going really viral, the spirit tunnel, where they have people cheering and then, the celebrities walking through the spirit tunnel. So that in itself always becomes a viral moment. And I think that was a really great synergy of the perfect audience to hit when it comes with Druski, right? We put him on traditional television, linear television, where people are watching it, is, reaching millennial demographic, but the older demographic as well, where you have the CEOs and CMOs of these Fortune 500 companies, watching these shows. But at the same time, you're having this viral digital component of that show that always takes off on social media, to the fact that, like, within a week of Druski's, Jennifer Hudson appearance, Jennifer's team had sent us, social media metrics, and it's like his spirit tunnel appearance, ended up getting close to 70 million views in just a span of 6 days since his appearance, right? So I think that's where just you're looking at just the way that press is evolving, right? There's always going to be that impact from traditional national TV appearances, and there's a beauty to that. But it's also, how do you have that synergy with national TV, and then also making sure that you're still, still resonating from a digital content perspective? Because I think at this point, we know content is king. So, but with that, Monique, I know you had some questions on your end.
Yeah, I just got a question from Kevin Oliveira. He's asking, how do you feel about WAP and content reward systems? How do you feel those affect an entertainer's brand and reputation?
Sorry, I didn't hear again. So, what do I think about what? I'm sorry.
I'm not sure I know what WAP is, WHOP, but he's asking about the content reward systems and how they affect an entertainer's brand and reputation.
I'm not sure. I think maybe we can get clarification on what he's referring to. Oh, I'm seeing right here, content reward system effect. I think it'd be great to get a little context of what you mean by WAP. I think if you're just talking about what you're getting from a receiving end, obviously, I think the way we analyze success is not only just the social media dialogue around it, but also how it's getting picked up in the press, right? I think that's how we assess whether something is truly resonating, right? That's really the byproduct of the opportunities you're trying to create, is making sure that there's a dialogue happening on the social side, but then also from a media relations side. And I think the beauty is we try to create moments that truly, can hit both buckets.
So Dave Curry is saying WAP is a UGC platform where you reward users for using your content with the spend per amount of views.
Oh, got it. Well, so in my world, for full clarification, that's probably more on the paid spend side. What we do on our end from a publicity perspective is the earned media side, right? So it's literally just it's reaching out to the television bookers, it's reaching out to the reporters, right? And making sure, hey, how can I use I want to have my client on your platform to promote something, right? So that, because there is, and what I will say is the lines are starting to blur now when it comes to digital marketing and PR. But I think traditionally, right, when you're looking at publicity from just kind of a traditional lens, it's like, okay, how do we start, if you have an album to promote, you have something, or you're just trying to remain visible, part of the elements of it's just setting up interviews, it's making sure you're getting, primary visibility on television, but it's sometimes also putting you at the right events. And obviously what I'll get to in a few other slides is there's a few other elements to that as well.
Jumping on that, Didier, I just got a question that I'm finding interesting relating to just appearances and all of that. Someone's asking, what are ways a local artist can begin to get some publicity in their city?
Sure. So I think first and foremost, I think it depends on how you have your team structured, right? I think if it's a local artist and if you have a manager right now, especially if you're coming up, the manager kind of plays all positions. So I think obviously making sure you have a bio, making sure you have a social media presence. And what I would recommend is, again, any accolades that you've accomplished and having, usually what I'll say is at least if you can't afford a publicist at a time, having a manager that can at least reach out and do the research, right? And this is something where even a buzzing artist can also put in the work, as well as identifying, okay, let's start locally. So you always know most local markets have the local ABC, CBS, NBC, and Fox. You usually have, you know, local magazine or a local newspaper. So I think it's identifying who is covering music and entertainment, in those particular platforms, and just reaching out and sharing some music and just giving them a little bit of information, right? So I think that's the way of, and of course from a local radio perspective as well, because that also plays a role, from that respect. But I think, obviously as you're building your audience, and you have a story to tell, because at the end of the day, it comes back to the story. And I always tell everybody, you got to think, how does your story separate yourself from everybody else? Because everybody, there's a bunch of aspiring, artists, and so it's like it has to also be more than the music. And I think it's identifying what makes you unique that lends itself in part of your story with the music. And I think as you identify that, whether it's working with the manager, working with the publicist, to have them reach out to some of these local platforms. I would say what the beauty now is, especially with the way things are shifting, from a digital perspective on Instagram and TikTok, and I think I like to say platforms like On the Radar really, played a big role, is there are so many new and emerging platforms for emerging artists, right? We're giving you the opportunity where, you can record a song, do an interview, whatever, that can go super viral. Like, and if you look at someone like Ice Spice, who did a freestyle on the radar, and then that helped catapult her into a completely different direction. That also, ended up lending more credibility to On the Radar, where it's like, oh wow, okay, hey, this platform helped, propel this young rising artist. So I think I use that case study example is just that with emerging talent now more than ever, it's also, hey, not only on the traditional TV, newspaper, and radio, but look at, hey, are there any platforms in your market that maybe is looking for, hip hop artists to drop a freestyle, and, you pull up to a specific, location, whatever the case may be. Maybe it's even also investing if there's another market nearby, but doing some of that research and also looking at different content creators within your market that you can collaborate with to be able to showcase your skills. And I think now more than ever, it's a really, really strong time for young and emerging artists to be able to cash in and start building their names, via social media.
I'm going to ask one more before we go on to the next slide, because this one's interesting. At what point do you feel like an artist or entertainer needs to be in their career to get PR and a publicist involved? Should they be more emerged or more evolved, or at any point, or what point do you feel like it's best for them to start getting PR and a publicist involved?
I mean, listen, I think part of it is there's different ways of looking, right? So I think sometimes in some ways where you may feel like you have good music and you may have a good story, but you may not have an avenue. And listen, you may not, you may be a younger artist, and I know several young artists who are super talented with a great story, but they may not have the funds in order to do it. And what I tell people all the time is just like, well, especially, there's always a hungry intern. There's always a hungry, you know what I mean? So I would say if you have someone in your network, whether it's, somebody that's interested in PR, someone that's studying PR at college, like sometimes it's like uniting with them and seeing how you guys can help build each other together. If you're an emerging artist and you have a friend who's studying PR, somewhere, then it's like, hey, why don't you, this is giving you real-time experience right then and there, right? You can help me out. And it's like you can help start pushing my narrative a little bit. And then at the same time, it's like we're both getting real-time experience and kind of growing on the job. So, in that respect, you're not out here spending tons and tons of money off the rip, with someone that may have a bunch of clients and may not be able to give the younger artists the attention that they may deserve. And otherwise it's also looking, potential freelance arrangements as well. So I think part of it is doing research and due diligence, and looking whether it's on social media, using platforms like LinkedIn and trying to identify people who, especially now and especially in this economy, there's a lot of talented PR people who just may right now may just be looking for, for freelance and consulting opportunities, and you may be able to figure it out at a good rate. But I think depending on where your budget is, wherever you're at in your career, you can be a young artist, but you may want to team with a hungry, ambitious kid in college or someone who just graduated, who just hungry for experience. If you're at a different level where you feel sense of momentum, right? It kind of also depends on your budget. If you have the finances to be able to bring, a PR from a reputable firm, that's great. But if not, it's like, okay, how do I tap into my network and, see how I can find somebody or at least figure out a freelancer, that can help me out at a reasonable rate in the meantime. And actually, one thing I'll add on that is even if you have a young artist who's buzzing and maybe has a hot song that's doing well on streaming platforms and getting a little buzz, but you still may not have that yet. It's because there's also that jump between like a hotter artist who's trying to make that evolution, and grow into that next step. And sometimes that comes with evolving with your team, right? There are some team members that can take you to a certain level, and then that's where you need to be able to kind of have the foresight of where you have to maybe change the deck in order to be able to elevate. Because there are some PR platforms who are just really good for emerging artists, and that's kind of where they tap out. I mean, if an emerging artist has kind of hit where they want to hit and they're trying to take that next step, that's then an investment on the artist side. It's like, okay, hey, let me go pay to get a stronger PR, PR agency who has more connections that help me evolve as I'm evolving within my career. So it's also having, that context of like where you're at and as you're evolving as an artist, making sure the team around you, if they're not evolving with you, you have to identify the appropriate pieces so that you're all elevating together. So with that, if we can go to the next slide. So as I was saying earlier, right, it's also looking at what are outside the box ways that you can get publicity for your clients, right? And I think one other thing is also just making sure that they're getting their flowers and honors, right? Because again, as I said, for ultimately at the end of the day, you're in charge of this individual or this brand, this company's brand, right? So what you want to do is continue to elevate their brand. And sometimes, again, from the last couple of slides, let's do traditional media interviews, coverage, whether it's digital, whether it's broadcast, whether it's written. But now it's like, hey, how do we explore other ideas to make sure we're increasing the visibility, especially sometimes when somebody doesn't have anything to promote. And I think one thing that I think our team has done a great job, and all of this has really been in the last 3.5 years, is just finding really special moments. Like I think, one of the first things off the bat, when I started my firm was like, hey, Too Short is a legendary West Coast hip hop icon, or a pioneer of West Coast rap, right? The guy's been rapping for 5 decades. And I'm like, I have not seen this guy get his flowers yet for everything that he's done. And I'm like, especially in his hometown. And I think at the very least, I'm like, you see all the time when some entertainers get honored with the key to the city or with the street renaming. So it really honestly started off with a cold a cold message to the mayor's office of Oakland, being like, hey, I'm the publicist for Too Short. I just wanted to reach out to see is there any way that we can get a street renamed after him, give him, some type of declaration, in his hometown of Oakland to really celebrate him and his legacy and everything that he's done. And for those who, may remember, even during the pandemic, he did the versus battle with E40 that, had its own moment. And it really just, literally came out from a cold email I sent probably in like February. And then the mayor's office saw the vision, they were interested, and you're like, you're absolutely right. This is a mayor who was, kind of outgoing and was trying to kind of figure out, hey, what can we do on our way out to really make an impact? And that's exactly what it ended up being, where we were able to get a street renaming for Too Short and get a proclamation designating a specific day as Too Short Day in the city of Oakland. And then so once we had that, right, and it varies with every team, but it's like, all right, hey, let's make this a movie. Let's make this a production. So let's really, instead of just making it a thing where somebody goes into the office and does a photo op, cool. It's like we went to Too Short's, gymnasium, created a whole event, from his high school. The high school band came out. It was a whole thing. We invited different artists, Ice Cube, came through. Mr. Fab, Sway Calloway, radio personality came through, and like we really turned it into a big event that celebrated him. And it was just a really special moment that ended up really just not only making a local presence for sure, but obviously getting a lot of national news. And I think that's something where we've kind of continued to run that play, because then the very next year, we did the same thing with E40, again, another West Coast hip hop legend, where with him, we were also able to get him the key to the city of Vallejo. And he was a second recipient of a key to the city in the city's 158-year history, right? So I think that's really what we take a lot of pride in, is that we like to create moments that are giving our clients their flowers, that are honoring them for their contributions to culture. And even some ways, and I include the photo of Megan, is like last year we had her honored by Planned Parenthood, because again, she's just been such a advocate for women's rights, and that's something that they've acknowledged. And we had conversations with them and figuring out what can we do just to be able to again honor our clients and give them flowers for all their advocacy. And that was just again another special moment at that ceremony, just her getting honored for her voice. And then you look at someone like Neo, where Neo, coming out of Vegas, we were able to get him the key to the city and a proclamation for Neo Day. And I think the cool thing with that one is we surprised him completely. So he's performed. He had a residency in Vegas, right? We all agreed as a team, like, let's not tell him. Let's stop the show in the middle of the performance, make him think it's like a little malfunction or something, and the mayor comes out. And that's exactly what happened. He performs one or two songs, and then everything stops. He thinks it's some like malfunction with the equipment. The mayor comes, gives this really powerful speech, presents him. Neo is getting emotional and tearing up, and then obviously has to still push through his performance. But this is also another element of PR, right? And I think that's why I think it was important to include this, is that I don't think people fully identify how, sometimes we have to create the narratives for our clients. We can't just wait to receive the information, or, to wait for an album promo, or wait for somebody to have a business announcement, whatever the case may be. It's also on us to proactively brainstorm and think of ideas on a constant basis of how do we keep elevating the narrative for our clients over time. Because otherwise, a lot of publishers just like to sit on their hands and wait and just be like, hey, when are you dropping? Cool, let me put a little promo strategy, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. And it's like, no, I think what we like to do is challenge ourselves of how do we keep elevating our clients in creative, ways. And that starts with just brainstorming as a team. And I think that's why specifically with these accolades, these are ones that, we're proud of, because these are all ones that came from our team, that we brought from ideation to execution.
This actually flows perfectly into Riz's question. She's asking, what should you look for when seeking out a good publicist or PR agency? And what are some key things to look out for that may speak to their legitimacy and quality of work?
I think that's a great question, right? At the end of the day, again, and this is why I tap into my journalism side as well. You're looking for someone who's a good storyteller. You're looking for someone that's going to advocate and fight for you through the good and through the bad, right? Because you're going to be dealing with crisis PR. And I think, the biggest thing is whenever you're talking to a PR firm, I always would suggest you ask them for case studies. Show me a little bit of what you've done in the past. What are some things that let me see what your track record is for success, and walk me through it. And I think the other thing is also asking them for a proposal, right? Anytime you're engaging in conversations with a PR firm, it's like, okay, why don't you give me a proposal? Let me see how you would tell my story. What are the outlets you think my story should be told in? What are the podcast platforms? Where do you see the opportunity, right? Because that's kind of your taste at getting what their sense of creativity is and how they'll tell your story, right? So I definitely think for sure is analyzing and assessing their proposal and what they feel they can do for you, because sometimes in there they reveal yourselves. If you see how much research they've actually done on you, and then if they're telling you they're going to put you in places that you've already been in, then are they really what you're looking for? You're looking for, but then there's also, right, there's a balance to it. There's nuance. You also want to make sure that PR firm is not just giving you the answers you want to hear. I'm gonna put you in the New York Times, whatever the case may be, right? Because there are a lot of people who just want to tell you what you want to hear. And I think it's really just, you want someone that when you're talking to them, you feel a level of honesty, right? For some clients, I'll tell them straight up, like, listen, your story is not New York Times ready yet. we need to build this foundation. It's going to start with X, Y, and Z. Here's one layer of it, here's the second layer of it, and that's how we're building towards. So that's also the other thing is like sometimes it's also being open and receptive from the other side and really understanding how is this person managing the expectations. So it's really kind of just, it's kind of twofold in that respect. But I think is making sure that you get an understanding of what work they've done and what success they've done and looking through their case studies. But then when you have to create a proposal and really assessing, because that's where you can truly size them up on what they see for your story and how you feel like they can be a proper representation of your brand. Because at the end of the day, PR people are the mouthpieces to your story.
Greg's asking if you were working with an emerging independent hip hop artist on a small budget, starting from the ground up, what would be the first 5 steps you'd take to build their career in a scaled version of your usual approach?
Well, I think first and foremost, if you don't have a bio already, let's get a bio, right? I need any and all information because when we're pitching out, artists that someone doesn't know, we need to know their story. I keep using the word story because that's what we're doing. So if I need your story, and we need to be able to create a bio that we can share with somebody else, right? I think that's one. I think number 2 is getting a sense of, again, what is it about this particular individual? What are they interested in outside of music, right? Because if they have anything cool in that respect, that opens you up to, hey, maybe I don't just have to focus on music outlets for this emerging hip hop artist. Maybe this emerging artist, I'm just making it up, used to play, I don't know, used to play football, whatever the case may be. Well, okay, maybe is it having this emerging artist perform at a high school football rally, whatever the case may be, where you get additional exposure, right? But I really think it's that. And sometimes it's just a matter of setting up meetings for this emerging artist with the appropriate reporters and the appropriate podcasters, right? That's also a strategy where sometimes, hey, listen, you may not have a story off the bat, but let me at least put you in the room where you can play some songs for the hip hop editor at Billboard, right? Or a music editor at Complex. So at least they can get familiar with your work. So then they can get a sense of your music. And we have honest conversations. They'd be like, oh, I thought that person was dope. Like, I think they have a bright future. I'm gonna keep an eye out for them. But sometimes, hey, I didn't like how that person presented themselves. I kind of thought the music was whack. We'll see where it nets out. But sometimes all it is those introductory meetings to be able to put that emerging artist both in the right room with these tastemakers and shot callers. So that maybe it's not anything for right now, but then as that emerging artist's career evolves over time, then at least that infrastructure, that groundwork was laid that then and there that can help them, proceed accordingly in their careers.
Manuel is asking what you would consider to be an efficient but affordable amount of money to invest in this quality of PR.
I mean, I think that it all depends on your goals, right? Because you got to look at PR like legal. It's a services-based interest. It's a service-based profession, right? So in the same way, it's like you're essentially, even though you're paying in many cases a retainer, it's really you're paying for the time, you're paying for our brainstorming, our creative strategy ideas, right? And our relationships. So it varies for different levels, right? I think best advice I've always been giving, you're as good as you negotiate, right? So it's like, especially with emerging artists, like, yeah, maybe, you may, I would say probably work with the freelancer, probably try to work with the intern, get yourself a little buzz. If you're an emerging artist, that has had, some radio looks, some DSP looks, a little bit of momentum on some platforms, and you may want to, go for a smaller smaller PR firm. Maybe you can do a 3K a month, retainer, whatever the case may be. But then obviously, as you ascend in your careers, is obviously when, the budget and how much you're investing, is going to get bigger and bigger. But I always say, it's your brand, so you got to treat it like a business. You got to treat it like an investment.
Let's go on to the next slide.
Yeah. And just another element of PR, I've kind of alluded to it already, but it's again just another aspect that I think people don't always immediately think of when it comes to PR. A lot of people think of like, oh, the TV performances, and yeah, we do that too, right? The Jimmy Fallon, performing at Fallon and Kimmel and whatever the case may be. But it's also one thing we found very effective is just things like national anthem performances, right? I think we had someone like Mickey Guyton, who's this renowned country artist and decorated with several Grammy nominations. But it's like, okay, well, what's another way we can put her in front of different audiences? Where it's like, all right, well, let's have her sing the national anthem at the NBA Cup, right? Where it's just, and that's something that the NBA recently introduced, but they've been putting a lot of attention and dollars and money behind it and everything. Where it's like, okay, you're getting the national television exposure, right? But then on the flip side, while you're having your client there, you can also put her for an interview for, ESPN, whatever the case may be. So, and you can start putting a country artist in front of a sports audience. And again, the goal is for me to always put my clients in front of new audiences that they're not usually in front of. So even like the NBA has only done the NBA Cup the last 2 years. The first year was the in-season tournament, and they rebranded it to the NBA Cup. And we've been fortunate that we have a good relationship with the league that in year one, they did it in Vegas. So I hit them off the bat. I'm like, hey, you doing it in Vegas? Neo's a Vegas guy. It would be great to just have Neo do the national anthem and you guys saw with a bang. And, it was great, that LeBron was playing and the Lakers won and that added extra visibility to it. And then the next year we brought in, Mickey Guyton, same thing. It led to that. Not only did it lead to a big moment for Mickey Guyton, but then that also those two moments led to us having both Mickey Guyton and Druski playing in the NBA Celebrity Game at the All-Star Game this past February, which was a great moment for both of them, but specifically for Druski, who went absolutely viral just from that particular moment. So even with that, you're kind of just seeing the progression in these slides from what started with this conversation with Neo, which led to something with Mickey Guyton the next year, which then the following years leads to something with Mickey and Druski. And that's also just the importance of maintaining good relationships and doing right by your relationships, starting from that first interaction with Neo and moving it forward. But again, we even like with Mickey, last year alone, we had her do the anthem at the US Open at the women's title game at the NBA Cup, and we actually had her as one of the opening performers at the Democratic National Convention last year as well. Which of course with that and the election at the time was a big spotlight. And with Neo, I included this, which I thought was really, really awesome, was a couple of years back, we had him perform a 4th of July at the White House. And it was just a really special moment. I think the coolest thing was we had him perform at Michael Rubin's white party the night before. And then we literally the next day took the helicopter from the Hamptons, to DC and had him performing over here, for President Biden. And again, with that, you're putting him, also in front of an international crowd. Anytime you're doing anything from a political sector, that's getting amplified, beyond just a national perspective. And I think that's just something that, I didn't include any slides here, but, our agency played a big role with with assisting the Biden and Harris campaigns last year, just with, having talent performing, whether it was, Mickey Guyton, whether it's having Fat Joe speak at Vice President Harris's rally or performing for President Biden when he was still in the running, or even having Megan Thee Stallion perform, and when Vice President Harris first got the nomination after Biden dropped out. How can you integrate your clients into these key moments that are gonna just ensure maximum visibility and continue to just get them in front of different audiences? And we just like to take an outside the box approach to our storytelling. That's really at the end of the day what it comes down to.
What key information and assets do you think someone should put in a press release for an upcoming or ongoing project?
Sure. So if you're gonna announce an upcoming or ongoing project, I think what's fascinating about it, what makes this project stand out from everything else? Because there's so much, it's such a crowded music, marketplace now. So it's like, what makes it, is it the features or who's on, right? If it's not the features, is it the subject matter? What are they talking about? Are they hitting topics of mental health? Are they hitting topics of, overcoming trauma, whatever the case may be? It's like, I tell everybody, what's the story? Like I tell the client, what makes your project special? Like, what do you want people to take away from? So I think it's, from a press release perspective, that's what you need to look at from there. But then for the individual, especially if the individual is not as well known as traditional big names, is including a list of their accolades in there. So whenever whenever you're sending your press release to a media outlet, to a reporter, that reporter is looking at it. And maybe for a lot of those reporters, is the first time they've even seen this artist's name or whatever the case may be. So I think it's really important how you present it, because presentation is key for everything. And if you're not presenting your client in the most optimal way, and if you don't believe in your client, how do you expect the reporter to go believe in that client and want to write a story about it? So even when you're, considering taking on prospective business, for anybody, in here that is considering a career in PR, so you got to make sure, I say, don't just take the client for money, right? Take it because you believe in the story. Because if you believe in the story, you're going to do a much better job of selling the story.
On the note of performances, someone's asking what's the best way to start getting paid for shows?
I mean, see that, I would say that's a little bit out of my wheelhouse from a publicity perspective, right? Because I think for what we do is, again, we try to get national visibility, just get great visibility for a client. The more visible you get, the more in demand you'll get, the more you'll get more, opportunities to perform, right? So that's kind of how I see it in terms of the business of the performances and how that's worked through with promoters and, managers and bookers. That's a little bit out of my sector. But what I can say is the goal here is to be able to continue to elevate your client and putting them in different places, so that yesterday's price is not today's price anymore, right? So it's like the hotter looks you get, the hotter momentum, the more you can drive the price when it comes to, to paid shows. But what I will say, right, is that sometimes, and also, depending on what the level of, conversation is with your clients, things like that, from a publicity perspective, there are times, depending on who it is, where because of your relationship, you can bring in some paid performance opportunities for your clients as well. And, and that's obviously a way where you can bring added value to your clients because of your relationships. And that's why I always say all the time, like, not only are we paid for our, our strategy and our time, but we're paid for our relationships.
Kevin Oliver is asking, he's saying, I'm a marketer that truly supports a blend of traditional and digital campaigns. He's curious where you see this going in the future as humans have started to become flooded with info on devices. Not necessarily specific to a marketing standpoint, but on the PR side, where do you see the blend of traditional and digital campaigns going?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I mean, it definitely, like I said earlier, the lines are blurring between like digital marketing and traditional PR, because now, like, we're targeting a lot of these platforms. I like to, you guys may know, like, that 13-year-old, 14-year-old girl, Jazzy, right? That girl that she started off with that viral Jay-Z interview, and she just putting them on her Instagram and just been building her following, right? And I identified her, saw her years ago, and then I was like, oh, we should bring some of our clients. And that just kind of spawned this kind of content creator thing where, like, now there's just a lot of Instagram or TikTok platforms that are just based on interviews. So like one of my favorites that I watch is this platform called the School of Hard Knocks, where this 20-year-old guy just approaches billionaires and multimillionaires and asks them for just advice and just sharing a little bit about their story. And I ended up securing that for one of our billionaire clients, right? So I think more and more there's going to be a whole shift of moving interviews towards Instagram and TikTok, because again, that's what the younger generation is targeting towards. I think the one thing we just need to be very careful of when it comes to social media, and I do think at some point there's going to be some type of regulation, legislation in regards to social media, because there's just so much misinformation that's being disseminated on that. And I think people now don't know how to distinguish what's fact from fiction, because I think growing up, whether it was newspaper or online journalism, you knew how to corroborate what was fact from fiction. Being like if you saw something, you go to the New York Times or whatever prominent media outlet and see they were reporting it, and that's how you would verify your news. These days, because of just the era we're at, both from a political climate and just on social media, where you can just post and say whatever the hell you want about somebody without major repercussions, that is where it's kind of it's causing some concerns, right? And from a publicity perspective, that's something that we're definitely keeping an eye on for sure, because it feels like more and more you're just fighting the misinformation battles over time. So Ultimately there is a lot more opportunity that comes with TikTok and Instagram where you can, there's more visibility apps, and even with X to some degree, but it's like a lot more visibility apps. Like I think another platform I like to put my clients on is this show called like the Track Star Show, and it's like, I don't know, probably like 500K followers on Instagram, and probably just as much, if not more, on TikTok. And all they do is they interview they have different celebrities on, and they're listening to like a song, and it's like they have to guess what the song is, and it's something really fun and playful. But like then we saw, Paris Hilton's done it, and Kamala Harris has done it, and Jimmy Fallon. So then it's like, oh well, why not have our clients? So there's a lot more opportunities there for sure, but it's also with social media, there's still a lot more risk and a lot more challenges as you're trying to, especially from a crisis PR perspective, when you're trying to fight misinformation and you're trying to clarify an incorrect narrative that's written about your client.
Jordan's bringing up a valid point with the Super Bowl being one of those opportunities that makes sense not to get paid for the mere reason of getting exposure. He's asking, how do you view paid performances versus exposure that can help boost catalog sales?
Well, I wouldn't even just say, and I wouldn't even limit it to just performances, right? I would just say just to anything. There are some times where it may be a prominent national TV look that may, an interview, whatever the case may be, and an artist may live in Atlanta, but the interview op is in New York, right? So it's just like you got to look at it as a business, right? There's sometimes where you just have to invest in your business. You have to take risks and see. It's like, hey, I have this exposure, right? That can really put me in front of a bunch of different people, and I may have new fans coming out of this, right? But it's like, do I do it and come out of pocket for it, or am I waiting just to get paid for it? And that's such a tremendous question, by the way, because that's still just something where we deal with it with different clients. Ultimately, there are some clients who have a higher risk for just invest, or rather, they're more tolerant to paying out of pocket and investing in themselves than others, right? And ultimately, at the end of the day, you have to adjust to what your clients' wishes are. I tell people, PR is a recommendation industry. My job is to provide recommendations to you and explain to you why I think something is valuable. At the end of the day, you are the client, so you may either decide not to do it, you may decide to do it, or you may take what I presented and maybe try to build on it and create a different idea that was inspired by mine. And we kind of meet halfway in that respect. So it's really a lot of those times where it's like, all right, I'm going to propose it because I think it's valuable. And I think sometimes it's worth investing in because I think it's going to help your career long term. And this again goes, by the way, this goes beyond music, right? Because sometimes it may be an artist who's like, you know what, I may have to do this. And even though I'm not going to get paid, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go out of pocket to go to this city to do this interview to get this look, because I'm also outside of music launching this business. And I'm going to need this platform in like 2 years to promote my tequila business, my vodka business, my cognac business, whatever the case may be, my rum business. So let me also value these relationships and take care of these relationships. So when I need them to look out for me a couple of years later, that they will. Because at the end of this day, and I'm sure you've known this by now from different sessions, but relationships are everything. And in my eyes, relationships are way more important than money. You do well by people, you take care of them, it's gonna open up more doors, unlock more business for you to make more money. But I think that's why there is that balance. It's like, hey, sometimes you should invest in the relationship, invest in the opportunity, invest for the exposure, because that'll ultimately help unlock, more opportunities. And don't get me wrong, you got to get your money. We all got to get our money unlocked, but that's where you have to assess everything from a case by case basis on where you're at financially, what the opportunity is, what it can do for you in the short term and the long term.
Do you see a way for artists to use AI to help with PR?
I think for emerging artists, I think certainly, especially those that don't have traditional PR writing skills. I mean, obviously, you can have Chat GPT help you, craft a press release about yourself together. But I see AI as like, AI is there to help simplify the job, but you still need the individual to do this, because it goes back to my thing on relationships. Like AI is like, nobody's gonna write the story for you. Somebody still needs to put you in front of the reporter, the editor, the TV booker, the podcast booker, whatever the case may be. Right? All it can do is help you when you're putting your bio together, whether it's giving you any, creative ideas when it comes to any cover art, whatever the case may be. and help you at least with a first draft of the press release. But AI is there to help us save time, but also there to to ultimately supplement what the PR professional, what the team is also doing, right? And so relying on the human individual's idea, creativity, because PR is not going to tell you, hey, you should go out get a street renamed for E40, right? But what PR can help you is like, hey, E40 is going to be releasing a new single. Can I get a draft bio? The single is called. I'm just making it up. Tell me, just use an Ola. Tell me when to go. Right, release me. Write me a draft, and then again, it's going to have a lot of fact checking, inaccuracies, but it'll probably still give you a good foundation, and then you can write it from there. Sometimes you may need to write a speech for a client if you know, they're going to go talk about something, so you can creatively be like, hey, how would you write a speech if you were preparing to accept an award or something like that, making that up. And then you take a foundation, see how it is. It may work, it may not work, and then ultimately you put your spin on it. But I like to at least use AI as like creative thought starters to supplement what we're already doing and what we're being proactive about.
I like that. Anything else, Didier, that you want to share with us? I actually have a question. If someone were to start right now, they're like, hey, I'm ready to embark on this PR journey. I know I need the exposure. I know I need to get in front of people. What would be the 3 steps you'd tell them to take today?
Well, I think again, one is especially if you're emerging artists, you have to be ready to sell yourself to the publicist too, right? It's different once you kind of already are an established name and you're in demand. But it's like, again, there's emerging artists for several years from the day they started. It's like, you know, I'm just like, okay, what's so special about you? Like, you know what I mean? And I think it was just one of those things where really just getting understanding of how you sell your story, right? And also do research into different PR, right? Do research into who if you see like an artist that you feel is like kind of comparable, the artist that you like their PR kind of trajectory, you should study them, see who reps them, do your research into different PR agencies as well. Sometimes just even, it probably wouldn't even hurt just to like, as you build your network, you run into any publicists, just like asking them for advice. Exactly this, or coming to this and be like, hey, how would you strategize with me? But it's also like identifying who are some artist trajectories that you like and how you followed it, and then also kind of getting a sense of like as you're talking to prospective PR firms, getting a sense of like how they can replicate that for you.
I have one more question. Have you had any clients that started off shy and you've worked with them to get themselves out there?
Yeah, and I mean, there have definitely been some clients that have, especially when you're young and new into the industry, you do interviews, like a lot of them don't like to talk, or they have them one sentence answers, and it's like, oh boy, like this one's a project, right? And part of it, right, and I think that's the beauty of just the mental health conversation, just in general, is part of it you realize over time. Part of it is just also some of them being anxious, they're being thrust in this new light that they've never been, and everything is about optics and presentation, and they're so nervous that they don't really they don't know how to formally present themselves, and some of these people are also figuring themselves out. And I think some people just have that charisma and that ability to talk off the dome, off the top of their heads with no issue. But there are also just some people who need to grow, and that they need to grow into that and grow them and know themselves as a human. You see that over time, where there's been some artists that like maybe in year 1 they weren't the best interview, but like 2-3 years later, then they have a little bit more of a sense of confidence, and they know and they understand themselves. So obviously, as a publicist, you give them advice and you walk them through what are the do's and don'ts, what are ways to be able to elaborate and tell a stronger story, right? And that obviously comes with some media training for sure. And some people, obviously, well, media training does resonate. You practice Q&A scenarios and see how they answer, and you give them those adjustments in real time. But there's other people where just quite simply that's just not their makeup and their personality, and that's just something you have to be a little bit patient with as they get to know themselves as humans better. And just with time and repetition, they get better and better. Even like the founder of Say Less, is even taking it out of an artist. Like when he was first doing interviews, like yeah, you could tell he'd be a little nervous, a little shorter on some of the answers, and we talk about it. And then over time now, He's been doing this for 4 years now, where now he's so much more seasoned that if he can do it, effortlessly without issue. And that's just, again, this is a byproduct of anything. It's just like with repetition, repetition comes mastery.
Time for one more question. I just got this last one in. Do you think it would be a bad idea to reuse the same cover art for a single that's a part of a full album, when they release a single with the same cover prior to the upcoming release?
Well, everybody has different strategies for that, right? Because part of people want to bundle it into an album. So that actually goes beyond the broader PR conversation, right? People do some of those things and make strategic decisions for that reason, for other plays from a behind the scenes perspective. So, again, that goes beyond my purview. I always say that is a artist and a management decision. And one of the things of a good publicist, you never try to get involved and play other people's positions. You let the artist make the decision, they're the client. You let the manager, you bring any recommendations in that case. But because that's not really a media type of decision, I can understand how it's perceived with media. So I would say, if you're in that position, I think you would simply just ask the talent, ask the manager, there's a specific reason or rationale as to why they did that. And you just keep it in the back of your head. And if there's a situation where you can make a recommendation to push or see if there's anything else, cool. And if not, then you still make it work with what you got.
Amazing. Didier, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your energy, your knowledge,